We're on the same
When I
side.
woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
One about the past and one about the future.
Welcome back to Draftvice. It is Draftvice. I am Walter. This is Ricky. If you remember Ricky, he's done a lot of things on the Draftvice. It's the offseason. We are coming up on the conference championship games. But when this airs, that it have already happened, we'll either know who's in the Super Bowl, probably the 49ers or the Packers or the Titans or the Chiefs. One of those four, right?
That is how it works, yes.
Or two of those four. Sorry. Numbers, right?
Yeah, it's not like the Browns are going to show up.
No, they're not. They're gonna have like sleeper candidates. Ouch. You know, I like Stefanski. I haven't done my Stefanski brag yet on this show.
It's not the worst move.
No, I actually thought it was a good hire. But we're not here to talk about the Browns and Stefanski and all the Minnesota people. We are here to talk about today. We are doing a look forward, 2020, folks. Looking forward, and we are looking forward for the Broncos. And we have an inside guest on the Broncos track.
That means I'm a fan.
He's a fan. He likes the Broncos, the Denver folk. And then we also are going to talk about the Detroit Lions. I don't know any fans of the Detroit Lions. They're on the Twitter, I heard. Or maybe they're still on the MySpace. It's hard to get them into the conference room. They're just like, we're in Detroit, and there's not really a lot of Detroit fans in New York. So, we had a hard time getting some Detroit Lions fans, but we are going to talk about them, right? Mr. Patricia hanging on for his dear life in the Lion, in the Motor City, if you will. So, but let's go into the Broncos, because we got a Broncos fan here. You guys have had some coaching turnover. You guys have Vic Fangio, just finished his first year as a head coach, and got rid of his OC, got a new OC.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really have a problem with Scarangello, but I'm still okay with the move. It's one of those things where it's a slight improvement, and I think it's kind of telling about where they feel about Drew Lock, because I think they're making this decision around the decision-making with regards to play calls that best suit his skill set. And I think Scarangello was a bit conservative. I know you like to say that Pat Shurmur's conservative.
Off, right before we get into this, Scarangello sounds like a form of gelato, right?
Yeah, actually, not a very good one, but definitely a knockoff brand.
Treat. Yeah.
Yeah, well, meant to be tasty.
Yeah.
But he's really just an offensive coordinator, maybe going to be demoted to QB coach or something, wherever he's
Well,
going
he's interviewing with the Browns right now, so that just shows a demotion automatically. But no, yeah, so they fired him. They picked up Pat Shurmur. I think Shula's going to follow him over there to be his QB coach. So Shurmur and Shula together again. Didn't go far this time. But I get what you're saying, though. Shurmur at least has shown consistently that he can call a good offense.
And believe it or not, I know. Look, I'm not. You can't quote me directly on statistics, and this is a poor sourcing that I'm doing right now. But I know that I've heard somewhere. I was reading something about how higher percentage of deep passes, deep shots, particularly on third down, kind of going for it, a little bit less of these short passes, that Scarangello, they felt like they weren't really taking the training wheels off of Drew. And the times when they did, he shined. But for whatever reason would kind of revert back to that style. And with the weapons that they have, and Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, big playmaking receivers. We could talk a little bit about their draft strategy. I think one of them, they might be looking at a receiver, which might be another toy for them. But and Noah Fant, it has all the makings to be an explosive offense. And I think Pat Shurmur being a little more experienced, I think it's actually a good move for a young quarterback.
Yeah, and I actually thought Pat Shurmur kind of got screwed out of New York. Like, let's be real. I don't think him and Gettleman were not a good pairing. Probably the last time Shurmur's getting a head coaching gig at this point, right? You can't. Usually you don't get three. Very few would ever do. And I think landing with the Broncos, I think Vic Fangio goes, you know what, I don't have to worry about this guy leaving in 2 years.
Yeah.
And that's a real benefit, because Scarangello, like, say he does take off, you're going to be having to worry about somebody picking him off your squad and make him a head coach.
Yeah, it's
and
true.
then he's going to fail. He's going to come back to you, going to be like, dude, I lost my job. Vic Fangio's like, I already got a new guy. I can't hire you, man.
Yeah.
So Scarangello comes from that Kyle Shanahan coaching tree. He was actually the QB's coach in
San Francisco.
In San Francisco, the Rice-A-Roni team. So he, I think that's why they're looking at him for Stefanski with the Browns. I know they're looking to kind of use that Kubiak scheme. I think he's going to be more likely a QB's coach. I don't know if he's going right back to OC. Just because I think there's some rumblings about – now I know he's interviewing for OC, but, they say OC and then he comes in and they're like, yeah, you didn't do great there. You want to come in? I think he's a backup guy. I think they're, like, waiting on him to see, like for the Browns, they're like, if we can't get one of those San Francisco kids or somebody from the Minnesota Vikings like the Kubiaks, we'll take you up on your offer. So I think that's the point of that interview process. So yeah, now you got Shermer. You guys got a lot of cap space. You got about $60 million in cap space. I said this the other day, $65 million doesn't sound like a lot, and it's really not a lot, but you guys can clear up a little bit more if you get rid of Flacco.
Joe.
Yeah, Flacco. But he's going to leave some dead cap, right? He's going to be about $13 million in dead cap, but $10 million in free space. So take the free space while you got it, right?
Yeah, you're the numbers guy, so you know more about than me. All I know is that it just seems like Denver every year doesn't have a lot of cap room. I don't know why. It's just been my perception.
And so this year's a shocker that, hey, we could actually clear up a little bit more.
When I saw the list, and again, I don't really always know what those mean, but they said that they were kind of at the top or closer to the top of the league, and like
I'm shocked
how much
top
room they
because
have.
$60 million doesn't sound like a lot.
Look, I don't know. I could be wrong, and I could be making stuff up.
But there's been years where we've had other teams that had over $100 million. The Colts are like over $100 million in cap space. So
yeah, I think that hopefully they'll make some moves, particularly on the offensive line. But I also would really like them to bring back a lot of the guys that they have leaving.
Yeah,
particularly on defense, which is where it seems like everyone's leaving from.
Yeah, you guys have Chris Harris leaving. You have Justin Simmons leaving. Now that's a guy they've spoken about. You said potentially use one of the tags on him, the franchise tag.
There's been rumblings.
Tag.
I would like to see him get a long-term deal because I think he's been a nice, slow development into a superstar. He came in as a young, athletic rookie a couple years back, and he's really kind of taken a step each year. And now, I mean, Pro Football Focus, I know we go back and forth on whether that's the best way to evaluate somebody, but he was their highest-rated safety for the year. So, I mean, he made plays. Rarely was he out of position. Good tackler for his kind of a slender frame. I mean, I've got nothing bad to say about the guy, and I think it helps that he learns well under Kareem Jackson's there as a guide.
And that seems to be a big part of Vic Fangio's defense is the safeties, right? Like we were saying before, Eddie Jackson in Chicago was really good. Had a great year there.
And Adrian Amos when he was there, and they had.
Exactly. So they seem to go ahead and pull in guys and do really well with some safeties. And I feel like his scheme is built off the safeties. So he's done really well with not great corners and really good safeties. So I think they keep Simmons. I think they're going to probably let Harris go.
Breaks my heart.
Harris is in his 30s. You were a big fan for years. This is actually the head of the Chris Harris fan club.
Well, he came in as an undrafted free agent and just like Simmons, got better every year. Wasn't talked about. Ridiculously good in the slot. Could play outside, and he's done that in the past. And he started off really strong this year. I thought he was making a real case for getting re-signed. Back half of the season, not as good. He was forced into roles where he had to be outside more. A lot of injuries to the corners. I know they're counting on Bryce Callahan coming back.
Yeah,
he never really got going. He never really got to play this season at all. So I think they kind of view Harris as somebody who might be expendable. And I would like them to target a corner in the draft. If not in the first round, definitely in the second. I think we have some decent depth coming up in that draft. So
yes, it's a good draft for corners. There's Fulton and Okuda are topping off the draft.
Yeah,
and there's also guys like
McKinney.
Henderson, McKinney. Well, Xavier McKinney's more of a safety. There's as I said, Henderson. Wasn't ready for the pop quiz on all the.
No, we don't. But
Fulton, I like. Fulton's had a lot of mixed reviews on him. I actually know one guy who has Fulton ahead of Okuda. I don't know if I really agree with that one.
I don't either. I like both of them, but I think there's a clear-cut one. It seems like there's a clear-cut one for me every year.
Yeah.
And this is the one. And for whatever reason, it's just trading off between Ohio State and LSU. It just seems to be the thing that happens. They produce these defensive backs that are ready to go, and they can perform right away.
Yeah, so I think, and then, again, safety-wise, a good safety class, too, this year with Delpit, McKinney, a couple of other ones. I think that they're, and receiver this year, folks. I mean, we've talked about it a dozen times. We'll be talking about it all year about the receivers. And that seems to be a position you guys are talking about. If you're going to stick with Drew Lock, I think they're going to try to get him some weapons, right?
Yeah, I would like to see them target, or I wouldn't be upset if they were targeting Henry Ruggs. Where they're picking.
Speed threat.
Complement to Sutton. Sutton's more of the big target. And I like that pushes Deshaun Hamilton into the slot where I think he shines, and he finally started to come along and understand route running, which was what they were hoping for. And he dropped less passes as the season went on. So you keep him inside, you get a deep threat outside. Maybe it takes some of the coverage or the attention off of Sutton. You combine that with Fant, who hopefully can get lined up right this year. That would be, I can't, as a fan, I'm excited. But objectively, you have to say they have a pretty good nucleus right now, or at least a promising one.
Yes.
And look, Drew got something. He's got something. Beyond his play, people like him. His players like him. He's got some sort of swagger. He's rapping. He's doing everything he can on the sidelines.
He's got a cannon for an arm.
Yeah.
He hits a player. He could hit a player in the head with a football.
Yeah,
and do that very accurately.
Yeah, it's usually Fant, but
Fant. I'm liking. I actually liked what I saw from Fant this year. He's shown that I'm actually kind of excited to see what that player does. Athletic, not as built as much for, not as refined as Hawkinson coming out. But then again, actually, he kind of had a more successful year than Hawkinson.
And his blocking was a lot better than I think people anticipated. He was in and out, but they were starting him on first down, second down, third down very early on.
Well, what it reminds me of was David Njoku, like guys who are like, oh, that guy might have a little bit of a problem blocking, but he can do it efficiently enough where you have to respect him as a blocker.
I think they looked at it was going to be one of his big weaknesses, and it was really
they thought he was going to be like an Evan Ingram, where he's basically a big wide receiver.
The bar was so low that I think his play wasn't, it made it look a lot better than it was. But, so I think that he erased at least some of those questions where it was going to be a complete liability. But, and look, they have a lot of people leaving on defense, as they say.
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, they got Shelby Harris and Derek Wolfe. Derek Wolfe has got a lot of injuries. He's a stud. I would like to keep him. I know he wants to retire as a Bronco. He said it before.
Bit on the older side, too.
Bit on the older side. Shelby Harris showed a lot of promise, not particularly a nose tackle, but when he was put back at defensive end, he made plays. I mean, he bats balls down in prime time, interceptions. This is a guy that you wouldn't expect, and he's been playing really well. Another guy that kind of came out of nowhere. And with the emergence of Draymond Jones later in the season, and there's reason to believe that someone like Derek Wolfe might be expendable. I would like to see them bring him back.
Absolutely, especially because if you're just going to like Derek Wolfe was actually not bad as a pass rusher a little bit. Would get you a little bit of push on the inside. But I think that like what you're saying, you have you want to re-sign Harris, you have Draymond Jones, and not only that, but your outside guys. You got Bradley Chubb, who's going to be coming back off an ACL. You got Von Miller, who is still an elite talent in the NFL. And Vic Fangio's coached up this defense really well. Like it started out the year like it was kind of not doing great, and then it got a lot better by the end of the year. Like that became an elite defense. Not elite, but it's in that it's getting there.
Especially at the back end of the year, it was very difficult to score on them in the red zone. In fact, they were one of the top red zone defenses all year. That's where they really buckled down and kept people out.
I think that was one of those games that cost Freddie Kitchens his job.
And I think what was also smart was when Bradley Chubb went down, they went and replaced. They signed Jeremiah Tachu, who ended up playing really well for them. And
another free agent that's coming up on your roster.
Yeah, you wonder if they're going to bring him back or if he was kind of a Band-Aid for the time. But I would like to see them hopefully extend him. But if you have Chubb coming back, and you're probably gonna draft more pass rushers. You can never have enough pass rushers. DeMarcus Walker's kind of a hybrid, and he's shown flashes. He's shown not some good things either, but I think he's improved more so than last year. So I think they're in a good place. And then in the safeties, I believe Will Parks is also a free agent. I could be wrong about that, but I think him and Simmons are leaving, and I remember them talking about that being an issue. It'd be nice for them to bring him back, but I could see him also going somewhere where he can compete for a starting job. If he's in Denver, I don't know that's gonna be on the table right away because Kareem Jackson seems to be sticking around for a little bit.
He's got a hefty contract. They're not getting rid of him this year. He's got a lot of guarantees left on it. What do you think is like the biggest weakness as far as this team goes? Is it the offense? Is it just the weaponry? Is it is there any weaknesses on defense, like linebacker potentially, or?
So their middle linebacker, Alexander Johnson, kind of came out of nowhere and played really well. Especially, I forget when they started, probably against Tennessee, when they shut them out 16-0. So Denver has had games this year where they beat really top contenders, beat the snot out of the Texans. They played the Packers tough. They played the Vikings tough. they surprised a lot of people, but a lot of that had to do with this switch to Alexander Johnson in the middle. They were going with I'm blanking on his name right now, but the middle linebacker is white. We'll figure that out at some point. But they kind of switched him in and out. Mm-hmm. He was getting blown off the ball. He was good in coverage, but it was difficult. Alexander Johnson is he's really been a
all around good linebacker.
Yeah, they lucked out. Maybe it's Fangio's system. Maybe it's something he saw in him early. But I think that maybe another linebacker to complement him. I also think their line could use a little bit of help. I think it's always good to add another lineman. So if they went in the first round, it's corner, receiver, or lineman, I'd be okay.
You also have a Connor McGovern, the guy who's playing your center this year, who's up as a free agent too.
Yes.
That's really a big worry in my head as they re-sign him. Now, I don't know how well he necessarily played, but if last year you guys lost Paradise, and now you have McGovern. And Leary's coming up on an option year on his contract. He's never really played center. He's been more of a guard. He played well last year.
He did.
A year ago he had injury issues with you guys.
I think that's another thing too. Our offensive line hasn't been that healthy.
What's it called? You guys paid a boatload for Jawan James, and he barely played for you guys this year.
I know. He barely played, and we had inconsistent play from Bowles. But see, the thing with Bowles is when he's on, he's on.
Yeah.
And when he's off, he's putting people in chokeholds and getting past. I think he was the most penalized left tackle this year by far. I just wish he would. I think it's got to be the fundamentals. He gets away from his technique, relies on his athleticism too much, and he needs to buckle down. And Fangio even said, I like Fangio. Kind of reminds me of Belichick in some ways. Very attention to detail, but also very blunt. In the media, he said sometimes Bowles plays with more confidence than is warranted, which is absolutely true. And he carries himself that way, which is both good and bad. But I also think that if he can get it together, and Dalton Reisner has been a really good pick. I could not be happier with him.
That was a favorite of mine last year in the draft.
Yes, I think they could also benefit from another running back to complement Lindsey. I don't think Freeman has really lived up to his potential.
Yeah. He had a lot of carries at Oregon. It was like $4 billion or something, and counting. He's just he's a little sluggish. Came in as a senior running back.
Reminded me of Monty Ball. When they had him, it just couldn't get going.
Well, some people thought he was going to be like the Kareem Hunt of the Broncos when he came out, and he's kind of been more of the LeGarrette Blount of the Broncos.
Yes.
So all right, he can maybe get, and it doesn't help that there's also a guy who's blitzing fast right next to you. It's we're gonna stick this tiny dude who can run 4-3 and just go right up the field when we have a hole.
But Devontae Freeman is just kind of a situational guy. He knows the blocking schemes. That's why sometimes they put him in on third down. But I would like them to get another running back to take. You don't want Lindsey taking shots all the time. He just had a follow-up wrist surgery. He gets injured. It's
also a good draft to be getting a running back. There's a lot of good running backs in this draft. Unfortunately, Travis Etienne not coming out this year.
I know. And
that was
really
announced.
Liked what I saw from him, and I was really hoping maybe he would be somebody that would throw his hat in the ring. But
I had a conversation with Lance Zierlein on Twitter about whether I actually don't. I don't say I'm not taking any shots against the guy from not wanting for going back, but I was just making a comment as far as the some players go back and they get the insurance policy, right?
Yeah.
They go to Lloyd's of London and they'd be like, hey, I tore my ACL. It caused my draft stock to drop. Yep. And the problem with that is that it's insurance. So insurance companies make money by delaying and denying coverage a lot of the time. And they also make money from the fact that, hey, if we get 30 people to pay their premiums and only one collects, we win out, right? But, they're money-making operations, insurance companies, and it actually happened with Marquise Lee a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. He tore his ACL at USC, came out, dropped to the second round, and he was, I guess, the year before projected to be a first-round pick, mm-hmm. or that year was expected to be a first-round pick. Dropped to the second round, tried to sue Lloyd's of London, and they denied the coverage, and he had to file suit against them because they wouldn't pay up. So this is what happens. You get stuck suing them. You have to hire a lawyer. I don't know where you get one of those. And then he ended up, and then they had to go ahead and fight it out in court. They're saying, oh, he didn't disclose an underlying condition, and he's saying dude, what the hell? And then there's other factors that come into it. Did this guy's stock drop? Naturally, was it just a big draft class? He only fell to the second round, not the fourth round. So there's some factors that come into that. But dude, Travis Etienne, more power to him. Was excited to see him coming out. There's a lot of other guys though. J.K. Dobbins, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh, dude, that guy's
explosive.
fun. I think that's probably him and DeAndre Swift, right?
Yeah.
Him and Swift are my two favorites. Those are my top two. Then it probably goes. It would have been ETN. I actually like Allaire, right?
Mm-hmm.
I actually kind of like Allaire over Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah.
That might be a shocker, man.
Jonathan Taylor to me.
He's got. Don't get me wrong. He's got power and he's got a lot of oomph to him. But I think he's RB4 for me, at least at this point. I think maybe because I'm a little bit more worried with the fumbling.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big thing because also you have to worry about opportunities. I mean, I understand no matter where you get drafted, you fumble, you're in the doghouse, and you need reps, and if that's going to happen early on in his career, who knows?
Yeah, and we've seen it happen with running backs. Like, you guys remember Matt Jones? Probably not because he's no longer playing in the NFL. Why? Because he fumbled a lot. So you fumble, you lose your job, especially depending on what place you get sent to. Kareem Hunt never fumbled when he was in college, fumbled one time in the NFL, didn't fumble again for like 3 years.
Yeah. But key point, never fumbled in college. So they're more likely to give you those chances again.
Yeah.
If you're coming in with questions of fumbling and then you continue to have those issues.
Well, that's the thing. That transfers a lot into the NFL. A lot of guys who fumbled a lot in college fumble more than the people who didn't fumble in college.
Oh, yeah. That was a concern about Adrian Peterson. But he was just such a stud that there was so many, there's exceptions to the rule.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of good running backs. A lot of good second round, third round running backs.
Which would be
I like
perfect
Allaire. I love Allaire, man.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a bad move for them.
Ray Rice kind of guy. Probably won't be like picked in the top of the second. Probably will be towards the end of the second, third round. Depends on actually when these running backs go. Right? Depends on guys at the end of the first round. Teams might go, hey, you know what? We're into the first round. We get a 5th-year option on these guys. Yeah. So maybe a team maybe is losing their running backs or doesn't have anybody special. Baltimore Ravens, right? That's a team I could see taking a running back early. But second round, you might go, you know what? We could have like the next Ray Rice on our team. We could have like hopefully he doesn't hit anybody, but we have like the next Ray Rice on our team.
Yeah,
or the next Adrian Peterson, or the next Nick Chubb. Who's another second round? Kareem Hunt. Yeah. Hopefully he doesn't hit anybody.
Yeah.
So yeah, running back. It does look like that might be a need for you guys. A lot of weapons, kind of. You guys need weapons.
You just want to build around a young quarterback.
And you also have a defensive-minded head coach, so he should be able to figure out.
Which is why I think Pat Shurmur makes sense too. You have an experienced offensive guy to help with the development. If you have Scarangelo, it's almost like they're figuring this out together. Yeah. They're both young. And not saying it can't work, but with Fangio being older school. And him being all concerned about the defense, and maybe he didn't agree with a lot of Scarangelo's calls. There's kind of some reports that they were kind of questioning each other's calls during the season. It seems to be a good move that's just going to help this kid take the next step. And I do think they're planning on sticking with him for the future.
Yeah, and Shurmur, I think I've never seen Shurmur with a quarterback with this kind of arm, too. Like if you think about it,
if you think about his conservative play, maybe that he's playing to what his quarterback can do.
Colt McCoy, right? Then he was he was with.
He had Case Keenum, didn't he?
He was with Chip. Well, yeah, he had Case Keenum in Minnesota and Bradford in Minnesota, but he was with Chip Kelly with the Eagles, came up to Minnesota, hung out with some Bradford and Case Keenum times. But like a lot of guys who really aren't known for the deep, having the strongest arm in the world, and also not the greatest offensive lines in the world. Well, when he was at the Eagles, he wasn't really the OC. But with Minnesota, Minnesota's offensive line has been a problem.
Yeah, sometimes I think that's a smart coach. You just because of what he's called, there might be a reason for it. What do you do with an offensive line? You get the ball out of your hands quick.
Yeah.
So this is your short passes. They think it's conservative. You don't have time to set up the deep pass all the time. You got
or you got to run a lot more play action to get that deep pass.
Yes, cover up the liabilities.
Yeah. Any last thoughts on the Broncos before we move on to the Lions?
No, I'm excited. Listen.
Any free agents that you're looking forward to? Any guys that you're thinking maybe this guy could land up with this team, or you think it's going to be a lot more re-signing your own and trying to maintain the status quo?
I would like to re-sign our own. I wouldn't be surprised if they signed another running back in free agency too to compete for it, because I don't know if they really want the crew they have going in minus Lindsey. I think they can build on that both in the draft and free agency. And I do think that, maybe it's a veteran guy, maybe it's an older guy that wants another chance. Maybe that's just somebody to take carries, goal line carries or whatever it is. Definitely want to look into offensive line. I don't really care who, but depth would be nice. But isn't
Byron Jones?
Yeah, okay.
Corner
That
from
would- so
the
let's-
Cowboys would be an interesting pickup for you guys.
Yes, it would, especially if they decide.
Younger than Harris, and like, okay, like, hey, we're trading to a younger, more athletic dude who can play a little bit more of a mix and match of zone and man concepts, played safety a bit.
And that'll inform how they approach the draft. If they sign someone like Byron Jones, maybe they're looking at a corner later in the draft, and maybe they go for someone like Henry Ruggs right off the bat.
Yeah, I think they have some guys they need to keep of their own. I think there's a couple of interesting. There's a lot of cornerback is an interesting year for free agency this year.
Mm-hmm.
Byron Jones being the one of the top of the cornerback guys, obviously Harris as well.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just a lot of Janoris Jenkins might get cut from the Saints after that late pickup for him, or maybe they stick with him and then they let Eli Apple walk. But there's going to be a lot of. This year's going to be an interesting year for cornerback and free agency. I can't wait to do the real free agency preview and just go do the breakdown like the week or two before free agency hits. That'll probably be right after the draft. So not the draft. The draft's much, but right around what's it called? What's the Underwear Olympics?
The combine.
The combine. There we go. We got the combine coming up, and we also got the Super Bowls coming up.
Yeah.
And that other bowl that they do with the players that are supposedly good in the NFL, the Pro Bowl.
Yeah. Cortland Sutton going to the Pro Bowl.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Lions. Matt Patricia had a lot of turnover in his staff, man. 10 assistants in 2 years, and I think it's going more. I think he's actually had more assistants since I said that, since I wrote down that note. So he might be into the mid-teens. That's not a good sign. That's a quick sign that you are not doing well as a head coach is when you have a high turnover assistants on your staff.
Seems like an intense guy too. So maybe it's just something where he's
I thought
also
he would be
difficult
such
to
a
work
cool
with.
guy to have as a head coach.
He's probably one of those guys that's super obsessive, super smart. He's a numbers guy. He wants to get things done. He probably is a worker. Maybe it doesn't gel with other people. Maybe he's too demanding. I don't know. I can't pretend to know what's going on.
Maybe he's just trying to do his best Bill Belichick impression, and that does not work, folks.
No.
You can't do an impression of Bill Belichick and hope it runs a whole team.
It doesn't.
You could just do an impression of Bill Belichick and hope it gets you a job.
Yes.
But what I think is this team actually looked competitive for about 3 games this year, right? Maybe 4. And then everybody started dying. Like Matt Stafford got injured.
Well, you lose your quarterback, you lose your season for the most part, right? I mean, it's
that was rough. They did sign Trey Flowers in free agency last year. I didn't see enough coming from them as far as what they were getting out of Trey Flowers. But again, they had a lot of like I said, they had a lot of injuries. Their back end was just leaking. Not for nothing, their defense has not been great. Right? Last 2 years, defense has been. It's been. Offense has been fine.
And they're wasting such
Even when they
talent at
didn't
the
even have
cornerback
Stafford.
position. They're wasting talent with Darius Slay.
Yeah.
I mean, he's playing really well. But everybody else is playing like garbage.
Yeah, and they traded away Glover Quinn over to the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah.
So that also didn't sit well with a lot of the people on the team. So, good thing is drafting high, you might get a couple of defensive weapons in this draft. We might have hinted at a guy named Okuda, one of the potential picks up at 3. They got a couple of options at 3. We'll talk about that. Lions also happen to have only about 43,000 in cap space, but and a lot of they don't really have a lot of things they could free up with the cap space, right? Mm-hmm. Like I was saying before, the Broncos could free up about $10 million from getting rid of Flacco, or if they don't exercise Leary's option, that's another $8 million. With this situation, it's a lot of guys who are on that team who contribute, like Ricky Wagner, Marvin Jones, not for nothing. Slay, all their big contracts are tied up with good guys. So this is a team that should be doing better. Probably will next year, hopefully.
Well, if Stafford stays healthy, you would have to. That gives them at least 3 more wins. When you lose your quarterback, you lose everything, in my opinion. Unless you have a young stud that you've been waiting to use, where it's actually a better move.
Yeah.
But if you have somebody look, Stafford's proven he can put up numbers. Stafford's proven he's not a bad quarterback. Stafford's proven he's a competitor. I'm not saying he's going to be, at this point in his career, chasing Super Bowls right off the bat. But you can have a pretty solid season with Matt Stafford under center.
I mean, he's at least as good, if not better, than Matt Ryan, right?
Agreed.
Yeah, and we saw Matt Ryan get to a Super Bowl. It should not be, infeasible for Stafford get to a Super Bowl. So
Right.
with that being said, they can clear up some cap space and get rid of Damon Harrison, right? Snacks traded for him. It would leave a little bit of a dead cap. But like, if they got rid of him, they got rid of Marvin Jones. I don't know why you get rid of Marvin Jones. It seems like your offensive weapons are doing you well. Keep as many of them as you can. Devin Kennard actually played really well for him this year, right? Linebacker,
Yep.
used to be on those New York Giants.
Yep.
And just so there's like some ways that they clear up some cap. But again, like I don't see them making a run at a lot of guys. Like they have Mike Daniels leaving. Okay, like
You think they would bring him back?
I don't think he did anything for him. Like
No,
that's the thing.
Maybe that. Look, hey, maybe Green Bay was onto something. I remember we questioned it in the beginning of the year, but sometimes you see that cliff that they're at.
And injuries pop
Right.
up, and things happen, and you go, you know what? It didn't work this time. Like I was wondering where Muhammad Wilkerson was this year. Like, remember that guy?
Yeah. Well,
Like same draft class as Von Miller. Yet I've not heard a word or peep or a shekel out of that guy.
sometimes that's what happens.
Except he got a DUI in New York.
That's when you hear about him. He's just trying to keep himself in the headlines.
Yeah, he got a
But
DUI a couple
look,
months ago.
I mean, hey, the Jets drafted him. That's usually a red flag, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you need a D end who also has a DUI, you can call Mo Wilkerson.
I actually wouldn't hate it if the Broncos took a run on him, to be honest.
Right? Like he, again.
This depth as depth. It's not like you need him to be your go-to guy. They have guys. But if you're letting guys like Derek Wolf walk, why not?
Yeah.
Not that we need to dip back into Denver. We can stick with Detroit. And Detroit, obviously, they have, some guys leaving. And you said you want to keep the receivers intact. Do you think they try to re-sign Danny Amendola?
That's an interesting one. He's like 39 years old. He's literally 34 years
But
old.
he was really productive when he was in.
Yeah.
When he was healthy.
Yeah. Well, that's always been the problem with Amendola, right? He's never always been healthy. He's a good slot player. It depends on the contract. I think that's a guy who they can get relatively cheap to come back and be their slot guy. And, if you keep him, Marvin Jones, and Kenny Galladay, like I said, dude, that offense was not
Galladay's
bad.
a monster.
Yeah,
we just
Galladay's a
glossed over
monster.
him. I mean, that's a really good draft pick for them. But
Yeah, well, I think they have to re-sign Galladay. That's the long run. Dude.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what you got to do. That's a plan you got to start putting into place.
even
just
at the
re-signing
expense of
him.
other players, even at the expense of other receivers, you have to get him back. He is a top-tier wide receiver.
Yeah, and maybe that's why they don't spend money on Danny Amendola. But another guy who they might want to look into re-signing is Glasgow, right?
Mhm.
Graham
Yep.
Glasgow. He's a guard/center for them. They swapped him around Ragnow a little bit. But again, that offensive line is actually was a strength for a little bit of that team, and it looks like it still can be going into the future.
Which is important when you worry about Matt Stafford's health.
And also just being an efficient offense,
Yes.
right? So keep a guy who could play guard or center, who's played relatively well at guard this year.
We also glossed over the fact that, like, Kerryon Johnson, I mean,
He got injured.
this was supposed to be his year. This was supposed to be his prime year to kind of break out.
Yeah.
He didn't really get any momentum going.
2 years in a row, he's ended on injury. Do you think that's another team that needs to look at a running back in the draft? like, relatively early?
Unfortunately, yeah. I mean, they've missed on some running backs, in the past. I mean, not like super hype, draft picks, but when you're looking at taking guys like Amir Abdullah, and you're taking guys like Kerryon Johnson, I'm not saying it's over for him.
Yeah.
But if he has another year where he can't stay healthy,
So, yeah, but I think both of these teams, went over the Broncos and went over the Lions, I don't think they're going a lot outside of their organization this year, right? I
Maybe-
think it's guys that they're re-signing.
you also might think about guys that maybe they've coached in the past.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, if Detroit, he was in New England, if there's guys that are kind of leaving there, they might want to look into them.
Devin McCourty. But they seem to be okay with their safeties. That's why they got rid of Glover Quinn. So,
Where's Kyle Van Noy on his...
well, that was the big guy on my list, was Kyle Van Noy, right? Pass rusher, because they don't seem to have a good outside pass rush.
He's a surprisingly good
linebacker.
player.
Yeah, he kind of plays both linebacker, edge, kind of that system they had up in New England.
Very smart. Can pick up the defense.
Yes, so knows the defense.
Knows the defense.
Knows what he wants to
And
do.
it's a complicated defense.
Also, used to be in Detroit. Literally was where he was before he was in New England.
Yeah.
So that's a guy who I think they could sign for a little bit of money to add to a piece to their defense, and I think that might help. At least is getting them some pass rush, and I think they're going to probably want to look to the draft for corners, like we said before.
Kuda would be perfect, especially where they're sitting. I don't think it's too high.
Yeah, they're picking at 3. I think there's only like a handful of guys you could look at 3, right? There's 3, right? There are 3 guys I have at 3. If I'm the Lions, I look at, right? Isaiah Simmons, right? Don't know if he's declared yet. I know the declarations were technically supposed to be in, but the list doesn't come out till Monday. Isaiah Simmons, weapon on the defense, right? Could play safety, linebacker, corner, basically a beast, chess piece. Guy who you would think, guy like Matt Patricia, know how to use.
Yeah.
Good guy. And also, there's some proof that causing an issue for throwing into the middle of the defense is it causes a lot bigger problems for an offense than, say, making them throw to the outside. Like, making them throw to the outside actually is harder for an offense a lot of the time.
Well, yeah, not everybody has that arm.
Yeah, exactly. So, guy who would help make the interior of the field a lot harder to deal with. Another guy, like we were saying before, Okudah, right? Now, you got Okudah, you got Coleman on the inside at slot,
And Slay on the outside.
Slay on the other side, man. That's a sexy ass defense. You can play all man coverage. You get Jared Davis back. Hopefully he actually, and Devin Kennard, guys who could play some good coverage. Get your hopefully get some D tackles to go ahead and actually be able to clog up the run. But that's a team that at least if they got those pieces together, because again, like the offense played really well. Even when they didn't have Stafford, they had Jeff Driscoll.
Yeah.
And he actually was kind of efficient on offense. Like
Well,
they almost beat the Packers.
That's testament to their line. I mean, when you have time, you make things happen.
Yeah, and scheming too. So I think this is Matt Patricia's last year. If he doesn't get them at least the playoffs, think about this. Jim Caldwell was there not too long ago, right? Right before Matt Patricia. They were doing a lot better with him. So, although actually Matt Stafford statistically was a lot more efficient this year. That they lost a lot of close games, but they got to close it out, man. You gotta seal the deal. Got to seal the deal, folks.
Yes.
And Patricia, you're on the clock. Better make the right. Oh, I had a third guy that I was thinking of talking about for them in the draft at number 3.
Yeah, you only said 2.
I did. Derek Brown.
Yeah, the D lineman.
Yes, D lineman Derek Brown from Auburn.
Auburn.
Yep. That guy.
Auburn with their D linemen. Every once in a while, a couple years, they come out. They just
Yes.
way to go.
Dude, so
They don't always work out, but they definitely,
But that's a Matt Patricia kind of guy.
Yeah.
Right? Like, good push from the interior. Could also kind of help stop the run. Kind of pairs up really well with Trey Flowers. I don't know what they're doing with Snacks Harrison. I don't know what they're going to end up doing with that guy. So
I say they let him go.
Let him go or trade him for like a pick swap or something. Like, do something with the guy.
Right.
But, I think that's a team that we might see a new head coach there next year if this doesn't work out.
Yeah.
But I could see Kyle Van Noy being a good guy that they get.
My question about Van Noy is, are the Patriots really going to let him walk? Sometimes they like to keep those veteran guys around, especially. I mean, they like to keep little scraps here and there.
Yeah.
But there's guys that are like, he's almost like their Vrabel right now.
Or another guy, Jamie Collins.
Yeah. I mean, Jamie Collins
had a good year in New England this year.
I know he was high up on John Elway's list when they were drafting way back when. I know he was a guy that they've had on their radar. There's a lot of mutual,
Patriots seem to find those guys that it's
admiration for him.
Like they only work well in the Patriots.
I know you send him to Cleveland and it's like, what happened?
Or anywhere.
Well, that's what I thought Amendola was going to be. Like guys like that. I thought Amendola would just be another example. Like what's Chris Hogan doing? I thought Amendola would be another example of, he's only good in New England. And, he's proven he can play outside that. So it doesn't always apply to everybody. But, when you're talking about who might fit into specifically the defensive scheme that was run in New England that Matt Patricia has, it makes sense for defensive players.
Yeah, you'd hope at least the guy who used to be the D coordinator in New England would know how to use those guys.
Yes.
So those are the Broncos. Those are the Lions. This is Draftvice. You can follow Draftvice at Draftvice on Twitter, at Draftvice_football on Instagram. You can follow me at Brojo Death Punch, which is BROJO, Death and Punch. Not and. There's no ampersand, nothing like that. It's just Brojo Death Punch. And Ricky?
Yeah, you'll just see me on another podcast, I'm sure, and then
he'll be on here again.
That's where we can let it die. Joe Burrow for president.
Joe Burrow. I can't wait to watch it. Like, this is going to be an interesting draft season.
Joe Burrow,
Tua, no Herbert.
No, Herbert. Herbert. He's out. Can't wait for Trevor Lawrence next year, baby. Woo!
Who would you gonna pick between Trevor Lawrence or Burrow?
Look, right now, I'm sticking with it. I don't care that he didn't have the greatest game. Guy's a competitor. Guy's got a lot of talent. Guy carries himself well. He's done everything he can to show he's probably the best prospect since maybe John Elway. I'm sticking with Trevor Lawrence. I don't care, and I think it'll show next year. He's going to be just as hyped up as Joe Burrow. And look, the guy had one loss. That's his first loss in 25 games.
He plays in the ACC, which is not really the hardest conference in the.
Yeah, but like you see teams all the time slip up somewhere, and they don't. They take care of business. That's what good teams do.
So
they're
basically,
beating the teams they're supposed to beat, which is important, and they're beating the teams that they're supposed to be competitive with the exception of this past season.
Yeah.
I mean, they were looked unstoppable the year before as well. I mean, they answer those questions every year. You're right about the ACC.
Yes.
But, you take care of business and you get up for every single game.
So you're going to go with Sunshine from Remember the Titans?
Yeah, I'm not going with Macaulay Culkin.
Yeah. All right. I'll take Macaulay Culkin. He did really well against those guys in the first Home Alone.
We're on to Cincinnati.
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
About the past and about the future.